So just listening to the right side, the tweet is not working. So disappointing. Anyway, let's sort it out. So when something goes wrong with my gear, which is inevitable, there's no way I could afford to be using such great gear, classic gear like this old console, unless I was willing to jump in and try to fix it. It's like owning an old car, and you know, if you want to enjoy it, you've got to know how to work it. There's no way I could keep any of this stuff working if I didn't know how to fix it. So again, we have a new issue. Last week I just fixed this UA audio interface, which the video is coming, you'll be able to see that soon. But the issue today is that my KRK E8 speakers, which get a real hiding because I run drums through them, so I have V-drums kits running through them, and mixers and mastering and all sorts of stuff. They get used basically like PA speakers, which is terrible, but anyway, that's the way it is. But here what I've got is my work log of everything I've ever fixed and worked on is here. So my car gets a huge mention because it's a BMW and they're just hopeless for reliability, seriously. I mean, look how many things I've got. Blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on. Everything I've ever had to do is in here. Things that are red are things that I cannot fix, haven't been able to sort out due to lack of parts or haven't found the problem yet. Usually not many. Most things have been able to resolve. And the one I'm looking at today is the KRK speakers, so the Expose is my ones. Here, this one is no woofer signal, speaker not working. What did I do? I checked the signal from the main amp and the impedance of the speaker was okay. I checked all the op amps and I replaced the capacitors here. Both were open circuit. So there you go. That was the no woofer signal working. And what I'm looking for is no tweeter. I want to see if I've ever had to fix it before with the tweeters. So I don't think so. Here we go. V8. I've fixed them a few times, which my repair videos are online as well, but this one, here we go. Expose, buzzing in both speakers with no input, even with no input signal. That was the capacitors in the power supply, which I replaced. If I can, I'll put a link as well to where I got the bits. I really recommend keeping a log of everything you work on. It helps so much. The first time I really got heaps out of a log was when I had an old Ampex tape machine and I found a work log from one of the early Ampex technicians who did this, and I still have it somewhere. It's great. But I used to go through that all the time because it'd be like track 6 not working, buzzing, and then he would say replace capacitor C22 on this board, and it was so awesome. So ever since then I've kept it. So some of them are like this one, RME Fireface, mine, low level rear inputs, very thin sounding, no bottom end. Turns out all the surface mount capacitors were bung, so I had to replace all of the 22 microfarad 25 volt surface mount input capacitors with wired capacitors, also recap the power supply, and that fixed the problem. It goes on and on. CR78, SH5, TR909, 808s, SPDSX, all sorts of stuff. So with the KRK, I reckon, starting at this, I reckon I'll have some capacitors that are short circuit. So let's open it up and find out what the story is. The E8s have these big heat sinks on the side of them, and they use a star driver, screwdriver, to actually get them out. So I'm going to take these off. And then this side panel will pop out and we'll be able to get access to the speakers. The other side has one as well. And I just can't remember which side is for the woofer and which one's for the tweeter. Access amplifier, because they're bi-amped, which means they've got 2 amplifiers in them. Like most of the higher end sort of studio speakers, one amplifier runs the tweeter, one of them runs the woofer. The woofer's working, so it'll just be the tweeter amp circuit. So hopefully in a second we'll be able to work out which side is responsible for the tweeter and see what's going on in the power supply for it. Let's see if I'm lucky or not. Bingo! It is the one for the tweeter because it runs up to the tweeter there. So this is the power supply for the tweeter. Let's see what's going on with this thing. So the first issue I can see is that this is not friggin' connected. So this actually goes from the main amplifier down there. There's a main amplifier board, and then it seems to go to these separate breakout crossovers for each speaker. So signal comes in, gets split through the crossover network, then goes out to each of these amplifiers to run the woofer and the tweeter. And this is not connected at all. So I don't know if it's just come undone when I've opened the speaker, if it was not on properly and it's vibrated loose, or what's happened. Have I accidentally pulled it off when I opened up the side? Anyway, let's plug it back in and see if that fixes it. Plugged it back in. No, it's still as woofy as ever. So that wasn't the issue. So let's move on to getting this board out and checking some of the components. Now, because not all humans suck, there's stuff like this. I found the E-amplifier voltage test points image just by searching in Google for KRK E8 service manual. And I found this, which bears striking resemblance to this. Relay, capacitors in the same positions, and it has all the test points. So if I plug this back in, I should be able to go around the board and just test if I'm getting those voltages to get an idea of if it's working and where it's breaking down. That will give me an idea of which components are faulty on the board. It even shows the transistor types, so I can find them out and measure them as well. So how awesome is that? Let's find out. Right, so I tested all of the voltage test points according to the diagram that I downloaded, and it's all correct. So with the power connected to it, I tested all of the points, didn't find anything weird there, it was all correct. So that seems to be working right. So let's check to see if the speaker's actually faulty. So using my meter on the resistance scale, I measured across the 2 pins of the tweeter, and it's showing 6.5 ohms, which is what you'd expect from a speaker like this. They can range from 2 ohms up to sort of 8 ohm, depending on the configuration, but it sounds about right, 6.5 ohms. So the speaker's definitely working. If we wanted to, we could actually connect between the red and the black pins there. We could actually connect like an output from a line jack or a headphone jack and actually get some signal happening with the speaker. Let's actually do that, see if it works. Right, so I did some funky dancing with my Arista drummer, connected that to the tweeter and had a listen, could hear it definitely playing back. So tweeter's good, that's good because that's almost impossible to replace, whereas amplifiers can always be fixed. Well, the next possibility is that after checking this little board, that this all seems okay. The next possibility is it's actually the signal that's coming from the main amplifier, which is in the back. So this has a big amplifier in the back of it, so that's going to be the next thing we're going to check and see if it's actually sending signal at all. Because what we should be able to do is, with signal coming in, we should be able to measure the signal coming from this cable, which is the one that should be sending signal into the amp. So we're going to test this and see if we're getting anything from this going to the tweeter amplifier. So let's try that. This time I've got signal connected to the lead coming from the main amplifier, which is the high frequency signal, and got my little oscilloscope attached, and we should be getting something on the screen. We're not getting nothing. So that means it's not getting any signal from the amplifier there. So yeah, that's got to be checked out. Let's just connect it to the woofer to see if we're getting, we should get some display there of the woofer signal. Right, well, I just did a couple more things. I took the woofer signal, which I know is working, and fed that into the little amplifier, and it made no sound still. So I think there's still a problem with that. So even though the voltage was okay at those test points, doesn't mean that the audio amplifier in there is right and not faulty. So I'll have to test that. Yeah, and we can actually test that by finding out if signals going into it and coming out of those little amplifiers. So what I did in the meantime was I took the high frequency signal. I'm just going to make sure I don't blow myself up, but yeah, I took the high frequency signal and plugged that into the amplifier that drives the woofer to see if that's going to amplify, and then through the woofer I could hear some of that high frequency signal being amplified through the speaker. So I know that the front amp here is okay, it's sending high frequency signal to this cable, which I could then amplify. So that sort of satisfies my thoughts that the little amplifier for the woofer, for the tweeter, is still faulty. And I also plugged in the woofer one into the little amp to test it, and it still made no sound, like I said before. So I think that is still the culprit. So let's test that it's getting signal in and out of the amplifiers. So what I want is just, if I had another one of these, I could swap it out and test if it's the board. Where would I find another one? Oh yeah! So I stole the amp from the other speaker, and that works. So I've proven that it's this one that's faulty. So I should be able to compare the two side by side and find out what the problem is. Again, it's a capacitor problem, I reckon. I started pulling out some of these capacitors and testing them on my capacitance meter here, and none of them are charging. So they're all dead. And you can sort of tell that it's going to happen. I mean, this is a high temperature circuit. It gets super hot. Everything's got heat sinks, massive heat sink fins on the power amp. And so what happens is they just dry out. And I never turn mine off. They just run all day, all night. I'm not always running signal into them, but they're always got power running through them. So they just get hot. They dry out and stop capacitating. Stop holding capacity, which is what they're supposed to do, and they die. So whole mixture of different ones, 22 microfarad, 16 volt, 35 volts, just replace all of them. And I've got the big ones out, which are big 6300 microfarad ones, and they're not charging either, so they need replacing. Usually what I find is when the big ones go, they start buzzing through the system. When the little ones go, they take out important parts of circuit and it just stops working altogether. So I think that's what the problem will be. I just replaced all those. They all were testing dead and bad, so I replaced them all. Again, like, this is a top flight amplifier. These speakers were super expensive, thousands, $4,000 each speaker box. But it just goes to show, you know, we're not the be all end all. Humans definitely didn't build the pyramids. And please, aliens, come and save us from crappy human technology. And that's not the wine talking. So these were all the bits. Probably $3 worth of bits. And the result, let's have a look. Yes. Working. Back to making music. Just a note on putting this back together is it actually uses like a star driver screwdriver bit rather than a hex key. So, you know, it's supposed to be to stop you from, they're called security keys, but you can buy them at friggin' Bunnings. So it's not really security when you can just go up the street and buy it, right? So, but anyway, so you just jump through the hoops and do the stupid stuff that they want you to do. But yeah, that's it. Just put it back together. And I mean, this is the problem with owning old gear, is that you will have to fix it. No one else is going to care as much about it as you. So you might as well learn how to do it yourself because no one else is going to help you.
The world is full of idiots that don't understand what's important.
You know, that's the reality. The only way you can afford to run a studio is to be able to fix the stuff yourself. You could never, wouldn't make any sense. You'd never make any money at all if you had to pay full retail price for everything and then pay a technician to fix it all for you. So you just dive in, and it's usually the simple stuff, and you can do it. Okay, I had my rant, put it back together, and now both are not working. What have I done? Tweeters are not working in both of them. I've done something wrong, let me check. Wrong connections! So that needs to have the grey one at the top and the red one in the middle. Goose. So there you go. See you next time. So there's always a curveball. Well, sometimes there's a curveball. And the curveball is that this one's not working. And the reason is because the speaker seems to have blown. I don't know why, but I've measured the resistance and it's zero. Well, it's high resistance. So it means there's nothing connected. It's like trying to transmit through the air. So there might be a broken wire. Let's find out what's gone wrong there. So in fault finding, I found something interesting. These transistors with the big heat sinks on them, these little things, it's a bit hard to get them in focus, but they're very delicate, and if you bend them too far, it breaks the solder joint, and that stops the high frequency. It stops the amp from working, basically. So I'm going to have to resolder those joints because I might have a dry joint in one of them. So I put it back in, and it stopped working. And then I fiddled that, and it started working again. I heard the relay click, so I'll go and check those solder joints. So here's the damage I've caused. I've actually burnt out the tweeter because I disconnected the power jack on the board without turning the speaker off. Damn! Also, the amplifier board has stopped working, but I think I've seen why. I've burnt out this resistor. So I have to replace that and then check the component, see what's going on. I've measured the voltages and nothing's happening around that point. So yeah, I've burnt that out.
I'm sorry, Morty. It's a bummer. In reality, you're as dumb as they come.
So I'm not going to shy away from this. I stuffed it. I blew it up. And let me tell you what happened. So when I basically unplugged the power from this board at the back before actually turning it off at the power box at the back, I actually blew up this resistor here, R51, which is actually 121 ohms. And I could tell I'd blown that up because it was black. So I measured it and it was dead. It was open circuit. So I popped it out and I didn't have 121, but I did have a whole bunch of 100 ohm resistors and a bunch of 20s. So what I did was I went and found the ones that were out of tolerance, and I managed to find 100 ohm that was, I think, 99, and a 20 ohm that was 22 or something like that. So together it made 121 ohms. So anyway, I put them together in series like that. Looks ugly, but works. The other thing I noticed that I'd done wrong was there's two capacitors in here, which are here. They're 47. Are they 47? I can't remember. They're 47 microfarad, but they're 65 volt ones. And I'd actually replaced them with like 35 volts, and they started to puff up and then they popped. So that wasn't enough. I went and looked on the circuit again and saw that, yeah, they should be at least 50 volt capacitors, and there's basically around that part of the circuit, there's 52 volts or so. So I waited, got some 63 volt ones, put them in, fixed my resistor, checked the other one next to it just to make sure. And actually, while I was at it, I pulled out this 546 transistor here and measured that just to check it was okay, because it's an 80 volt transistor, and it was okay, measured fine, so I put it back in. You can see it gets hot because it's got a heat sink on it. Checked all my other capacitors, make sure they're all the right way around, then connect it back up to the power on the speaker box, measured at all the voltage points, and everything came up fine. I then put it into circuit with my working speaker that I haven't blown up yet, and could hear it back playing no worries, tweeter working. Tried the other board as well, turned off in between first, and that's also working. So the power board's ready to go, and when I get the tweeter coil, which I've ordered from France, when that comes, I'll put that in, put that back in place on the speaker here, which is burnt out. So that'll be the next job, and then we'll get the speaker working again. Out at the laser cutter, I've created a 20mm hole that I'm going to cut out, and I'm going to cut it out of a piece of cork. And my idea is that this will be the template that goes over the coil, and I'll be able to screw it in to keep it in place, and that will become like a jig for fixing up the coil. So let's burn this puppy. I don't know how many times it's going to take, but we'll give it a try. Going to laser, and we're going to start. I already tried to cut it out on a piece of cork and it just burnt it, so it didn't work. So now I'm trying a piece of wood to see if I can actually just slip this over the coil, and then it will allow me to pull out the old coil, put some glue on the new one and slip it into place so it's exactly in the right position. So I'm going to try to cut this wood, and if that works, I'm going to then pick a small piece of wood to make a jig and see if that works. Let's see how this goes. Don't know how many cuts yet. I'll try 10 and we'll see how we go. Laser, start. All right, let's see how that went. Yeah, it's nearly through. So it needed some more goes, maybe 20. Maybe 20 goes. We might have to give it a try again, see how we go.
Temporary superintelligence is just a side effect of the mega seeds dissolving in your rectal cavity. Oh, man! Yeah.
Right, so I'm going to attempt to fix my KRK E8 speakers. This was the original diaphragm, and you can see when I had my little incident, it actually burnt the coil out. And you can't get these anymore, but you can get new coils. And I managed to get some new coils from Remy at Ninomusicfrance, but the problem is that when I took the coil off, the rubber from the speaker had totally deteriorated, and you can't get that anymore. So I had to go and buy the complete assembly, which comes like this, and it comes with the spacers as well. So that's what I've had to do. So thanks Remy for helping with that. Been really helpful getting it sorted, and hopefully I can fix this tweeter. So the first job I had to do was clean off this old rubber gasket from the coil, and then these are going to be stuck on top. There's two of these, and then this coil is going to be stuck on top of that. and then that whole thing is going to be screwed down onto the speaker. So let's use some epoxy, mix up some epoxy, put some small dots around these, glue these together, and see if we can get it back together. Well, that was really fiddly, but I think it's on there. It looks okay. Let's see how it works when it's on the speaker. Finally, working again. So I've only done one side at the moment. Might have to do the other side. But yeah, working, finally. So what have I learned? Not all people suck. Wine's not a good idea while you're fixing something. Make sure you've disconnected the power before you fiddle with things. What else? They're the main things.